is The Chris Abraham Show.
I realize that there are way too many podcasts today and that this is the third one, and I deeply apologize, but there's a lot going on. I was just listening to season 9, episode 8, which was scripted, and I thought it sounded stiff and awful. So I'm just going to go off the cuff without any AI background with regards to what's going on with regards to the Maryland dad environment, where there is a Salvadorian resident of Maryland who is a father of 3 and married to an American woman. That woman is Latina American, because when I heard her fleeing for his return, she definitely had an accent. So I assume that in our mind's eye, when she was described as being an American woman, I think that you and I all immediately imagined this Maryland dad, this Maryland man, this Maryland father as being married to some Maryland white girl. But he is married to a woman who sounds like she has an accent, which might suggest that she is a fresh off the boat immigrant who is a naturalized American. I'm just making that up. I don't know the story. I just know the story now, and what nobody's talking about, but has been in the rhetoric of Donald Trump for the last 5 years, and has been communicated to me by virtue of my spooky and high-level embassy and high-level spycraft friends, but is completely being talked about openly by the press secretary and by Trump himself and by J.D. Vance and by Pete Hegseth, or whatever his name is that these particular immigrants who are MS-13 and various and sundry other Mexican and Latin American and other cartels, these cartel gang members are not being treated at all like simple illegal aliens. The narrative for the last 5 years, and maybe all the way back to 2016, but especially since the moment that Biden was in office, and the narrative has become Biden has opened the border and it has been flooded with unfettered migrants from around the world. You've been ignoring what has been set down. Maybe only MAGA people or regular Americans have heard it, but it hasn't been the narrative of poor, decrepit, oppressed, and ejected and with their life on the line by coyotes snuck across the border in order to find a better life. The narrative for at least 6 or 7 years has been military-aged men being moved across the border en masse from around the world. Not Latinos, not Salvadorians, not MS-13 or whatnot, but people from Africa, people from Haiti, people from Cuba, people from the Middle East, people from India, people directly from China. The entire narrative has become, over the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years, has become America is being invaded by enemy combatants, by military-aged men. If this were a compassion, charity, altruism, then there would be little babies and little mommies and little grannies and little families. But the narrative that Trump has been sharing for the last number of years is that the other countries are emptying their prisons, they're emptying their mental asylums, they're emptying their favelas, they're emptying their jails. We're not getting the best people, we're getting the worst people. We're getting the insane people, we're getting the rejects, we're getting the prisoners, we're getting the ex-prisoners. That has been the definition the whole time. And amongst the, if you will, the conspiracy theory sphere, this is an attempt to do the Red Dawn scenario, but not via paratroopers with parachutes from airplanes, but by sneaking military-aged men across the border en masse with the support of anti-American social justice warriors, including Catholic Charities and all the NGOs in the world who are sneaking people en masse, military-age people into America, including CCP and including radicalized people from around the world who are, in fact, lying in wait, according to them, to be activated like sleeper cells. And now, if you will, this new law, or this law from 100 years ago, is being activated and weaponized in order to treat the people here who have any association with CCP, with MS-13, with any other cartel group or any other group from that they might have been associated with in their home country. They are basically being treated exactly like Al-Qaeda. They're being treated like Taliban. They're being treated like ISIS. They're being treated like, is it Daesh? They're being treated as if they are Hamas. And as a result, as a secondary effect of that, the radicalized protesters who represent our enemy combatants abroad in any ways, or the enemy combatants of our friends and family and allies, including Israel, are thereby considered enemy combatants in country and are also vulnerable to an anti-terrorist act of deporting and also sending to black sites, being disappeared, and being sent to this El Salvador terrorist super prison. So it's while the left is trying to make this sound like checkers for the last 10 years, and probably as part of the voting for MAGA, everybody knows that everybody of military age, everybody who has a sin back in their home country, anybody who has a rap sheet in their home country, anybody who presumably is part of this Red Scare, which is considered to be this sleeper cell network of enemy combatants who at any point will be activated and will take over America for who? For whom? Presumably for the globalists or the World Economic Forum or Davos or the reptilians or the who knows, the Illuminati or the blue helmeted United Nations or the G20 or the G7, who knows, maybe the Galactic Federation, possibly could be China as a result of China, or Russia's been secretly Soviet the whole time, it'll be Russia, or maybe it will be a Canada and Mexico sandwich. Who knows? There's this belief that while Trump isn't going authoritarian, according to the people who support him, he's merely being a guy who pledged on the Constitution that he would protect America and the Constitution against enemies both domestic and foreign and domestic. And he is describing and creating, and I do think, what I do think? I do think it is a slippery slope. I do think that if he can make sure that every non-documented illegal alien with a rap sheet at home, with any association with any kind of cult or gang or group or association with Hamas or Gaza or Al-Qaeda, or even family relations, anything that can be found out by the FBI and Homeland Security, everybody here will actually have to suffer the sins of their father. or in this case, their motherland and fatherland. And if that goes through, when Trump blithely says, well, we'll totally consider American citizens as well, I think his plan is to empty out the inner cities of anybody who in any ways has ever been associated with gangland, gangbanger, any type of looting, any type of antisocial behavior. I think at some point he is going to call the Crips and the Bloods and everybody in Chicago who is associated at all with the drill culture or anything like that. I think that any association one has with what is it called? With RICO. If you have a RICO red mark on your rap sheet, if in any ways you can be associated with conspiracy, or if you can be associated with RICO, or if you can be associated with gang membership, you also might be defined as a domestic terrorist in much the exact same way that the Biden administration was trying to create white nationalism as a enemy combatant terrorist group. This is just the other foot. Like I said, everything that is piloted as an anti-Nazi thing is actually then made into a law, is made into a precedent, and then is weaponized against the troublemakers in a broader sense, right? So it is piloted against Nazis. Who could ever hate a Nazi? Nobody ever hates a Nazi. So you go ahead and you weaponize law in lawfare against a white supremacist, a neo-Nazi, a fascist, and then it passes the Supreme Court, the local courts, the state courts. There's loads of precedent. This is exactly what happened with RICO. RICO was completely beta tested. It was beta tested on, if you will, Italian American mafioso, and then it was really weaponized in like Atlanta and so forth against white supremacists, and then all of a sudden it was turned against black communities and communities of color and so forth. In the same way, this anti-terrorism, domestic terrorism thing is going to, it was at first weaponized against white supremacists, against radicalized white supremacists, against Nazis, against domestic Nazis, against groups like the Proud Boys. And then once precedent happened, and there was precedence in terms of these kinds of things being weaponized against white radicals, it is of course going to be painted across migrant radicals, any kind of Gaza, Hamas, any kind of anybody associated with the Islamic Brotherhood, anybody, like it'll even take out Congress people and senators. It'll take out people in state and local Congress. It'll take out judges. It'll take out people in low-level positions. It'll take out people in federal lifelong bureaucratic groups. This is going to be, if you will, a McCarthyism, but with extreme teeth. And unfortunately, everybody like triple, like quadruple measured, and they're going to cut once, and they think that they're cutting the heads off of hydras, and they realize the hydra's heads will pop on, so they're willing to be called every name in the book, because don't forget the Henny Penny and the Boy Who Cried Wolf. At this point, I do think that if you consider every single person who is even loosely associated, even back to their teenage years, as being associated with any kind of street crime or any kind of family crime. For example, let's say the grandchild of Osama bin Laden, who of course I believe was a CIA asset, but let's say he wasn't. Let's say he was the evil guy from 9/11. Let's say, and then there's the whole Bin Laden family, which is a billionaire, extremely large billionaire family in Saudi and around the Middle East that does giant construction programs. Let's say the great-granddaughter of Osama bin Laden, or a grandniece or grandnephew, is in the United States studying medicine or anything. The sins of her father, her great-grandfather, or Abed from Community, right? That TV show Community. Abed was actively the autistic child of Palestinian parents and Palestinian grandparents, and was even from Gaza, and made jokes about his behavior now as not being very Ghazian. So as a Palestinian, even though he is in fact completely integrated and first generation, second generation in America, his dad is still Palestinian from birth, who was born there, might have a Palestinian passport or whatever passport people in Palestine are given now. And as a result, his sins are not his sins. The sins of his father, the sins of his grandfather will be given to him. This is extremely authoritarian, and like I said, I dare say that it's being weaponized by the state, capital S state, not 50 states. It's being it was originally a bait and switch. It was an easy thing to sell to the left, to Democrats who are anti-authoritarian, that in order to take out authoritarianism, we would proactively use anti-domestic terrorism laws to keep an eye on the Proud Boys et al. To attack January 6th, 1,500 January 6 people with extreme prejudice and with very little due process. We put that onto the books. It became precedent, and now all that stuff is being weaponized against the exact same people who allowed it through without nary, the same kind of people who I went to this beautiful conference with are saying Ashley Babbitt deserved to die because she was evil. And now that that's put into canon, everybody's like, oh my God, they're killing so-and-so, they're disappearing so-and-so. And one would say, well, you thought it was okay to shoot Ashley Babbitt in the face because he was a dirty Nazi. Well, we're just saying that you can shoot an undocumented former gang member in the face because he's a dirty terrorist, right? You see how these things happen? You see how state control moves forward? You see this is not about Trump even. This is about Biden being the face and Trump being the heel, and by passing it back and forth with the same game, which is ultimately a bait and switch. Go ahead and, if you will, just to use the analogy of fishing, right? When you hook a fish, you let it take out a big lead until it gets tired, and then when it's tired, you just reel it in, put it into the bag. The letting out the lead is giving carte blanche, let people loot, let people protest, let people burn down federal buildings, let people burn down cars, let people shoot each other in the street, let people bear spray officers, let them get away with murder, let them own the streets, let them create their own antisocial cities, and take notes. Let the panopticon go ahead and create portfolios and dossiers on them, with the ultimate idea that at some point there would be a day of reckoning where everybody with these long, cast iron, totally tight, rap sheets would be accused of all their crimes and would be thrown into the system to be, if you will, ground up like the unmentionables and into Law and Order sausage. So everybody who thought they got away with going ahead and going into a Buc-ee's or a Lululemon and just taking stuff, everybody's face was recorded. And at some point, every brown and black face, every white face, every poor black person, if you decide at any point to behave in an antisocial way, even a decade after your behavior, even past the point of like the 7 years when you should not be allowed to do it, if they take it under advisement that this is in fact a terrorist act and you are in fact an enemy combatant, there is no law that is going to hold anybody against you if you can be defined as a terrorist combatant, and that is going to be defined through precedent based on how it was defined as precedents by the January 6th courts, and as every single precedent that was ever being used against a white nationalist, a white supremacist, a white terrorist, a white supremacist, Christo-fascist, domestic terrorist, all of those things that went through super easily because everybody wants to punch a Nazi. It's all going to be weaponized against the people. It's a two-sided sword. It's a blowback mechanism, and people were creating the history of law. It doesn't say only for white people. It only says domestic terrorists. It only says radical. It only says these things. And then before you know it, you're right. It's going to be people are going to be sent to this terrorist prison, and it's going to be people of color. This is all going to be against people of color. It's going to totally be the way they're going to empty out inner cities of people that they perceive as gangbangers and as gang members and as the Crips and the Bloods, and as, if you will, people who are making cities unsafe for the citizens there. And the law will just follow all the law that was made, if you will, canon by all the people who came before it, and all of those things were beta tested on easy to ignore cases that are just like white folk. Nobody cares about when white folk get railroaded. Nobody anymore. But when you go ahead and make case law based on white folk being railroaded, then it's easy to railroad black folk and brown folk and Asian folk and Pacific Islander folk. And that is what I'm super afraid of. And if you don't think that the conservatives and the liberals, the MAGA and the anti-MAGA are all part of the same yin-yang. They're all the same. They're the same, if you will, what is it called? What's the term of the two-faced God? You're going to drive me crazy. Janus or Janus? Is it Janus or Janus or Janus, who is the two-faced God? Both faces are the same face of the capital state, S-T-A-T-E, vis-a-vis the authoritarian state. And the one side of Janus's face looks like Joe Biden, and the other face looks like Donald Trump. Amen, amen, hallelujah. I wish you listened to me earlier, but c'est la vie, c'est la guerre, and ciao for now. I wonder if you like this better than the scripted version. I am oftentimes, when I'm just trying to come up with it off the top of my head, I tend to have a lot of comment on dit, je ne connais pas le mot, qu'est-ce que c'est moments, but I think that they're a little bit less like staged feeling. And if you know that it's right off the cuff without any notes, then maybe you'll give me a pass for sounding so dumb because I'm just making it up and there's no edits. And I love all y'all. And if you like this episode, it's 9/9, right? Season 9, episode 9 of the Chris Abraham Show. And I am going to let a combination of, comment dire, Notebook LM and comment dire ChatGPT write my show notes. And I'm also going to allow them to name the episode. So thank you very much. And this is going to be my last podcast because I have a lot of work to get done before 9 p.m. tonight. So I hope you're well. Please subscribe, share, like, comment, share it with your friends, and please give me story ideas. I know today was like extreme amounts of podcasts, but don't forget, like before season 9, I did 9 episodes in 2 weeks. And before then, my last episode was, I believe, December 24th of 2024. So it's ebbs and flows. It's feast or famine, etc., etc., etc. Now, I want you to know that after the outro, there's going to be a whole conversation by the bots of Notebook LM. I don't know if all y'all know that after the outro, there's like another 16 minutes of 2 Google AI bots, having an NPR-style chat about what I talk about. And man, they have some really good insights, and they actually generally like analyze me in a better way than I actually like. They're like Chris whispers, and I really appreciate that. All right, mahalo, aloha, and until the next time, ciao.
Thank you for listening to The Chris Abraham Show. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. Until next time.
Welcome back to The Deep Dive. Today, we're getting into some pretty heavy ideas. They come from an audio recording one of you shared.
That's right. And it's important to know this isn't like a polished news piece.
No, not at all. It's someone speaking very frankly, kind of off the cuff.
Yeah. Unfiltered thoughts on, well, immigration, law enforcement, and how certain groups might be getting differently now in the U.S.
So our mission here is just to unpack the main arguments, the sort of core ideas and potential implications we heard in that recording.
Right. We want to provide some clarity, some context. We're not, taking sides or adding our own opinions here.
Exactly. Just laying out what the speaker presented.
So the recording, it kicks off with the speaker thinking about this small detail, actually. It's about a news story, a father in Maryland.
Okay.
And the speaker notes, like, a potential difference between maybe the assumed story that the father's married to a white American woman and what the audio actually says, which is that his wife is Latina American, might even be a naturalized immigrant, judging by her accent.
Interesting. That seems like a minor point, though.
It is, yeah, on the surface.
Yeah.
But the speaker uses it as a kind of springboard, to talk about these bigger, evolving perceptions.
Okay, so where does it go from there?
Well, from that observation, the speaker pivots pretty fast to what they see as a major shift, a shift in the whole narrative around immigration.
Right. And they argue this isn't brand new, exactly.
No, they claim it's been around for several years, particularly in Donald Trump's rhetoric, they say.
And this new narrative, it's different from the usual image of, like, migrants just seeking a better life.
Exactly. The speaker says it moves beyond that idea of poor, decrepit, oppressed migrants.
So what's the focus instead?
It's on military-aged men, specifically, arriving from all over, apparently Africa, Haiti, Cuba, the Middle East, India, China. They list quite a few places.
And the framing is different.
Very different, according to the speaker. The narrative they're describing portrays this as an invasion by enemy combatants.
Wow, okay. Enemy combatants, that's quite a claim.
It is, and it gets even more provocative. The speaker suggests this narrative includes the idea that other countries are actively emptying out their prisons.
Emptying prisons and sending people here.
Yeah, prisons, mental asylums, even favelas is the term used, sending, in the speaker's words, the worst people to U.S.
Okay, that sounds like, well, it sounds like a conspiracy theory, frankly.
And the speaker actually brings up a specific one, the Red Dawn analogy.
Red Dawn, like the movie.
Exactly, but not a literal invasion with tanks. The idea here, the speaker claims, is about sleeper cells.
Sleeper cells, as in hidden operatives.
Right. Infiltrated among the migrants, supposedly backed by anti-American groups. That's the picture they paint. Hidden threats walking among us.
Okay, so there's this alleged threat narrative. How does the speaker connect this to, like, actual policy or law?
They talk about a new law, or maybe an old law, like 100 years old, that's being activated and weaponized.
Activated and weaponized. Do they say what law?
Not specifically, no. It's a bit vague. But they describe treating people linked to groups like the CCP, MS-13 or cartels, treating them the same way as, say, Al-Qaeda or ISIS or Hamas.
So basically applying counterterrorism frameworks to potentially different kinds of groups.
That seems to be the implication, yes. Using those broad national security powers, surveillance, detention, deportation more widely.
And it's not just those specific groups the speakers worry about, is it?
No, they also raise the concern that radicalized protesters, they could also get spin this, classified as enemy combatants.
And what would that mean, potentially, if a protester was labeled an enemy combatant?
Well, that's a designation with really serious legal weight. Historically, it can mean suspending normal rights. The speaker specifically brings up deportation being sent to black sites.
Black sites.
Like
secret prisons.
That's the usual meaning, yeah. Outside normal legal checks. And they even mention that super prison in El Salvador, known for its extremely harsh conditions.
Okay, this is outlining some pretty extreme possibilities. How does the speaker think different political sides see this?
They suggest, the left might view it one way, but they claim many others are getting scared. Scared that basically anybody of military age or anyone with any kind of criminal past from their home country could be seen as a threat.
Right, a kind of broad suspicion.
Exactly. They actually call it a red scare, but involving sleeper cells working for globalist entities.
Globalist entities. What does that usually mean in these contexts?
It's often a kind of vague term, isn't it? Usually implies some shadowy international group prioritizing global agendas over national ones, often pops up in conspiracy theories.
Gotcha. And what about the other side? Supporters of Trump, for instance.
Well, the speaker acknowledges that they might see these potential actions very different, not as an overreach, but as simply fulfilling a constitutional duty.
Protecting America from enemies, foreign and domestic.
Precisely. So it really shows how polarized the interpretations are. Same potential actions, viewed through completely different lenses, either necessary security or dangerous overreach.
Which leads, I guess, to the speaker's concern about a slippery slope?
Yes, that's a key part of their argument.
What's the fear there specifically? Where does the slope lead?
The immediate fear they voice is for non-documented immigrants. That even minor past associations, maybe things that weren't a big deal before, could now land them in serious trouble under this, expanded idea of a threat.
Okay. But it doesn't stop with non-documented immigrants, according to the speaker.
No, they worry it could extend further. To American citizens.
Citizens? How so?
They suggest that someone with, say, a past connection to a gang, or even just what's termed antisocial behavior, or maybe involved in something related to RICO.
Their anti-racketeering law.
Right. That maybe even those citizens could eventually be labeled domestic terrorists. They draw a parallel to the current administration's focus on white nationalism as a domestic threat.
Implying it's like two sides of the same coin. Different targets, same expansion of power.
That seems to be the implication. And they use this analogy of beta testing laws.
Beta testing, like with software.
Sort of. The idea is a law gets introduced targeting one specific group. They mentioned RICO and the mafia back in the day, or maybe anti-terror laws aimed at white supremacists more recently.
Okay.
But then over time, the application of that law gets broadened. It starts being used against other communities, other types of activities it wasn't maybe originally intended for.
So the fear is that the current anti-terrorism focus, it starts maybe with white nationalists or maybe these migrant radicals the speaker mentioned, but then it gets weaponized much more broadly against political figures maybe, ordinary people with some kind of antisocial past.
That's the core fear being expressed. They actually use the phrase McCarthy with extreme teeth.
Wow. McCarthyism. That refers back to the 50s anti-communist scare, right? Lots of accusations, blacklisting.
Exactly. So McCarthy with extreme teeth paints a picture of a similar climate of suspicion and accusation, but maybe with even harsher tools and consequences available today.
The speaker gives some examples, too, to make this feel more real, I think.
Yeah, a couple of pretty stark hypotheticals. One was about Osama bin Laden's grandchild. Imagine they're studying in the U.S.
Okay.
Could they be held responsible somehow for what their great-grandfather did? That's the question.
Guilt by association. Basically, even across generations.
Right. And the other example used a character from TV, a bed from Community.
Oh, yeah, I know the show.
The point being, could his Palestinian heritage, just his background, be used against him or his family in this kind of climate, regardless of who he actually is?
So again, judging people based on origin or family ties, not their own actions.
That's the danger the speaker is trying to highlight with those examples, fear of broad brush categorizations.
And their overall take on this, it's pretty cynical, isn't it? They call it a bait and switch.
Yes, involving both Democrats and Republicans in their view.
What's the bait and switch exactly?
The argument is that maybe some new law or policy gets put forward, it sounds necessary fighting authoritarian, stopping some specific bad group, so people support it.
Okay, that sounds reasonable.
But the switch, according to the speaker, is that once that law or power is in place, it gets used for totally different things against a much wider group of people than everyone initially thought. And maybe that was the plan all along.
They even use this fishing analogy. Hooking a fish.
Yeah, the idea being that maybe authorities sometimes allow protests or unrest to happen, not because they can't stop it,
but to gather intelligence.
Exactly. Let the fish take the line, gather info, build cases.
Yeah.
For a future day of reckoning. That's the phrase they use.
A day of reckoning. What does that imply? Mass arrests.
It seems to suggest a time when authorities use all that gathered info plus these expanded legal precedents to go after people retroactively.
Based on past action, even minor things.
That's the concern, that things previously seen as just, disruptive or maybe minor offenses could be reframed as terrorism or threats to national security.
And they link this specifically to precedents from the January 6th cases and cases against white nationals.
Yes, the speaker seems to see those cases as setting the stage, establishing the legal tools and interpretations needed to prosecute people for activities that challenge the government or public order.
And the fear is those tools could then be turned on anyone.
That's the worry, that it could chill dissent, basically, and just give law enforcement a much wider reach.
So, wrapping up the main points, the speaker's biggest fear seems to be about disproportionate impact, right?
Yes, particularly on people of color. They explicitly mention the idea that this could be used to empty out inner cities.
By targeting people broadly labeled as gang members or, public safety threats.
That seems to be the core concern, that these powerful legal tools could be applied in a discriminatory way against marginalized communities.
And then there was that final comment. Seeing both conservative and liberal sides, maybe Trump and Biden as examples, just two faces of the same thing.
Yeah, like the Roman god Janus, with two faces looking in opposite directions. The speaker called it a yin-yang.
Representing, what, the authoritarian state itself?
That's the interpretation offered, a very critical view, suggesting that despite all the political fighting, both sides are ultimately part of or contribute to the same underlying authoritarian system.
Wow. Okay, that was a lot to unpack.
Yeah.
A really dense set of ideas from that one audio recording.
Definitely complex, and let's be honest, potentially unsettling arguments.
Absolutely. And just to reiterate, our aim here was simply to lay out those arguments, those concerns, as presented by the speaker, objectively.
Right, no endorsement, no personal commentary, just presenting what was in the source material.
So this deep dive, it leaves us with something to think about, doesn't it? Especially that beta testing analogy the speaker used.
It really does. It prompts a question for you, our listener. How do legal frameworks actually evolve?
Yeah, how might the precedents being set now, maybe in national security law, maybe in law enforcement approaches, how might they be applied differently to different groups down the line?
What are those potential long-term consequences? Something worth considering.
It certainly is. We really encourage you to keep exploring these topics, think critically about the arguments, and, form your own informed opinions.
Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.